My name is Nadia Voss. I'm 32 years old. And the Sunday my mother slid a budget sheet across the dinner table and told me my salary belonged to the family. Now was the night I finally understood that some people will keep taking until you make them stop. She didn't lower her voice. That was the part one keep coming back to. We were all at the table, my parents, my younger brother Colt, his wife Priya, their two kids coloring at the far end. And my mother set a printed spreadsheet in front of me like it was a menu, like I was supposed to look it over and say yes, that all sounds fine. The sheet had my net monthly salary at the top, already filled in. Below it were line items. Mortgage contribution. Grocery pool. Car insurance for Colt. A line that said simply, household reserve, with a dollar amount that was more than my rent. This is the household budget, she said. Your salary goes in here now. My father looked at the far wall. Colt reached across the table for the bread. I looked at the number. I looked at my mother. I set the sheet face down. No, I said. My mother's hand went still on the table. No, she said.
No.
My father turned from the wall. You live under our roof 6 years ago, Nadia. Everything we gave you, the room, the food, the car, when yours broke down. You owe us this. I hadn't lived under their roof in 4 years. I had my own apartment 11 minutes away. I came to Sunday dinners because I thought that was still worth something.
Nadia.
My mother pushed the sheet back toward me. This is what family does. I didn't raise my voice. Something in me went very quiet instead, the way a room goes quiet right before the power cuts out. I folded the sheet in half, set it beside my plate, and reached for my jacket off the back of my chair. I'm going to head home, I said. You're being selfish, my mother said. You only ever think about yourself. Colt finally looked up from his plate. He didn't say anything. He looked at the sheet, then at me, then went back to his food. I drove home with the radio off. What none of them knew, what none of them had ever thought to ask, was whose name was on every account that kept that house running. I want to tell you how I got there because the spreadsheet on the table didn't come out of nowhere. It was the end of something that had been building for a long time, and if you're going to understand why I did what I did next, you need to understand how it started. My parents bought their house in Delmore, Ohio, in 1997. 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard that always smelled like cut grass in July. My father worked for a regional logistics company for 22 years, warehouse supervision, solid middle income, nothing spectacular. My mother managed the household and worked part-time at a florist through my childhood. Colt was born 4 years after me, and from the time he was small, the family arithmetic worked a certain way. Colt was lively and loud and charming, and things went toward him. I was quiet and capable and organized, and things were expected of me. I don't say that with bitterness. It was just the weather of that house. I finished high school with a 3.94 GPA and got a partial scholarship to Oberlin, where I studied accounting and finance. I graduated in 3 years and 11 months, accepted a position at a mid-size regional firm called Hartwell and Marsh before I walked at commencement, and moved back to the Delmore area because housing was cheaper and I had student loans to knock down. That part was my choice, and I knew it. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Milford, 12 minutes from my parents' house, and I started paying down my loans at $1,100 a month while also building a small emergency fund. I was 23. I drove a 2014 Civic I'd bought used with my own savings. I packed my own lunches. I did not go to brunch. What I did do was show up. Every Sunday dinner. Every birthday. Every time my mother called at 8 in the morning because the water heater was making a sound and my father wasn't sure if it needed a plumber or just a flush. I came. I figured things out. I knew how to read a contractor estimate, so I read contractor estimates. I knew how to file a homeowner's insurance claim, so when a tree branch came through the garage roof in the winter of my 25th year, I was the one on the phone with the adjuster. My parents didn't have bad intentions. I want to say that clearly. They had a generational pattern. The capable daughter is the reliable one, the one who doesn't need to be worried about, and they followed it without ever examining it. Colt, meanwhile, moved through his 20s at a different pace. He married Priya at 26, a warm, funny woman who I genuinely liked and who I think understood the family dynamics better than she ever said out loud. They had their first daughter, B. When Colt was 28, and their second. May. 2 years later. Colt worked in sales at a local car dealership. He was good at it in a scattered way, strong months and weak months, and always something that had come up. The first time money moved between us directly, I was 27. Colt called me on a Thursday evening and said he was $1,400 short on rent. His landlord had already given him one extension. He had a strong month coming, he said. He just needed a bridge. I transferred the money that night. He paid me back in 6 weeks, which I hadn't actually expected, and that established something, a pattern of its own. The second time, I was 28. This time it was $2,200 car repairs, and the repayment came in pieces over 4 months. The third time, I stopped keeping a formal tally. By the time I was 30, the family had quietly arranged itself around my competence the way furniture arranges itself around a load-bearing wall. Nobody announced it. It just happened. I was the one who knew the contractor. I was the one who filed the claim. I was the one Colt called. And then, 2 years before that Sunday dinner, something changed in the infrastructure itself. My father had a health scare, not catastrophic, a cardiac stress test that came back with a finding that needed monitoring, and his cardiologist, a Dr. Reyes at Delmore General, wanted him on a specific medication regimen and a low-sodium diet and follow-up every 4 months. This was not a crisis, but it was a cost. My parents' supplemental insurance had a gap, and the medication ran $340 a month out of pocket. My father mentioned this at dinner one Sunday with the studied casualness of someone who has already decided they will not ask directly. I called my mother the following Tuesday. I said I wanted to set up a direct transfer to cover the medication. She said she didn't want to be a burden. I said it wasn't a burden. She said she would tell my father. We set it up. And then, because I was already in the accounts, because I already had the routing numbers, because it was simply more efficient, I started paying a few other things too. The electric, the gas, the internet. Not the mortgage, not the grocery pool, just the utilities, because they were the ones with the variable rates and the confusing billing cycles, and my mother had called me twice already about a bill she didn't understand. I set up automatic payments from my checking account. All 3 utility accounts, listed in my name as account holder. I didn't make an announcement. There was no negotiation. I just did it the way I did everything else in that family, quietly because it needed doing. At 31, I was a senior accountant at Hartwell and Marsh, billing $74,000 a year with a benefits package that included a retirement match and decent health coverage. I had paid off all but $8,400 of my student loans. I had $31,000 in savings. I had a good life, a small life, a life I had built carefully, and with my own hands. And then my mother made a spreadsheet. I should tell you about the months before the spreadsheet, because the dinner table moment didn't arrive without a runway. It started with Colt's lease. In February, 8 months before that Sunday, Colt and Priya's landlord sold the building they'd been renting in. The new owners raised the rent by $480 a month. Colt called me on a Tuesday. He said they were looking at a different unit, but they needed first and last and a security deposit, which came to $4,800. He said he'd pay me back. He said Priya's parents were helping with half. I said I'd think about it. I didn't transfer the money. It was the first time I hadn't. I thought about it for 3 days, ran the math on my savings trajectory, thought about the $2,200 from 2 years ago that had come back in pieces, and I transferred $2,400 instead, my half of the stated half, matched to what Priya's parents were putting in. I texted Colt. This is a gift, not a loan. I can't do more right now. He texted back, okay, thanks. The following Sunday, my mother brought up housing costs at dinner. She talked about how hard it was for young families. She talked about how some people had help and some people didn't. She looked at me while she talked, but not directly, the way you look at the wall beside someone's face. I said nothing. In March, Colt's car needed a transmission repair. The estimate was $2,100. Colt texted me directly this time. I said I was sorry to hear it, and suggested a second estimate from a different shop which I found for him, which came in at $1,650. I did not offer to pay. He put it on a credit card. In April, my mother called me on a Wednesday afternoon. She said she'd been thinking about the family finances. She said things were tight. She said my father's hours at the consulting work he'd picked up after retirement had tapered. She said she felt like the family needed to think about things more collectively. I listened. I said I understood. I said I would think about it. I went home and opened a spreadsheet of my own. I listed every utility payment I'd been making, every medication transfer, every amount I'd sent Colt over 4 years. The total was $41,220. I stared at that number for a while. In May, my mother sent me a text with a photograph of a brochure for a family financial counselor. The message said, "Nadia, I think this could be good for all of us, talking through how we can support each other better." I texted back, "I'll look into it." I did not look into it. In June, Colt and Priya announced they were expecting a third child. There was a dinner. There was a cake. Everyone was happy. I was happy for them. I held May on my lap through most of the meal, and she fell asleep against my shoulder, and I thought about what my life looked like from the outside, and what it looked like from the inside, and how those two things had never quite matched. And then in September, my mother made the spreadsheet. She had clearly worked on it. The formatting was clean. The line items were specific. There were 2 columns, current and proposed, and in the proposed column, my monthly salary contribution was listed as $2,800. The mortgage line had my name next to it. The car insurance line had my name next to it. There was a note at the bottom in small type that said reviewed with Dad. I set it face down and said no, and drove home with the radio off. I want to be precise about what happened in the week after that Sunday. I did not call anyone. I did not send a long text. I did not write an email itemizing my grievances, which I had drafted in my head approximately 11 times over the years, but never sent. I went to work. I sat at my desk at Hartwell and Marsh. I ate lunch at my desk on Tuesday and took a walk along the canal path on Wednesday and did not think about the spreadsheet. Or rather, I thought about it in a contained way, the way you think about something when you've already decided what you're going to do. On Thursday, I logged into the utility provider portals. The electric account holder, Nadia Voss. The gas account holder, Nadia Voss. The internet account holder, Nadia Voss. All 3 had been in my name since I set them up 2 years prior. I had the login credentials. I had the billing addresses. The bank account linked to automatic payment was mine. I changed the automatic payment status on all 3 accounts to manual. I did not cancel the accounts yet. That was important. I didn't want the house to go dark that week, not with the kids there on weekends. I just stopped the automatic payments. Each account would continue on its current cycle through the end of the billing period. The electric had 12 days left. The gas had 9. The internet had 4. Then I called my bank and removed the payment method on file for my father's medication transfer. I set a manual reminder for myself to make that payment separately, directly to the pharmacy, because my father's medication was his, and it wasn't part of this.
I was careful about that line.
On Friday, I called Hartwell and Marsh's HR department and spoke with a woman named Diane Albright, who managed payroll and direct deposit. Asked her to change my bank routing so that my direct deposit went to my secondary account, not the primary one that my mother had listed on the spreadsheet. I didn't explain why. Diane didn't ask. She processed the change and emailed me a confirmation. On Saturday, I went to the farmer's market and bought tomatoes and a bunch of sweet corn and made dinner for myself for the first time in a long time, without feeling like I needed to be somewhere else. On Sunday, I did not go to the family dinner. My mother called at 5:47 p.m. I let it ring. She called again at 6:03. I let it ring. My father called at 6:21. I texted him, "Not feeling well. Rest tonight." He texted back, "Okay, feel better." Colt texted at 7:15, "You good?" I didn't answer. I watched a documentary about migratory birds and went to bed at 9:30. The internet went first. It cut out on a Tuesday, for days after that Sunday, in the middle of my father's morning news program. My mother called their internet provider and was told the account was in the name of Nadia Voss and the last payment had lapsed, and the account was past due. She was told she could not make a payment on the account without account holder authorization, and she was not the account holder. She called me at 9:12 a.m.
I was at my desk.
I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 9:18. Again at 9:31. At 9:45, I listened to the voicemail. She said the internet was out and there must be some kind of error, and could I please call the provider and sort it out? I texted her back. I've transitioned those accounts. They'll need to be set up in your name going forward. I can help you do that if you want. She did not respond. The gas bill generated its final notice 3 days later. A letter arrived, addressed to Nadia Voss, forwarded to my apartment per the billing address on file, informing me that the account was past due by $218. I did not pay it. 6 days after the notice, the gas was shut off. My father called me when the gas went. His voice was measured. He said there must have been some confusion with the billing. I said there wasn't. I said the accounts had been in my name for 2 years and I had removed myself from them, and they would need to open new accounts in their own names. I said I was sorry for the gap, that I should have given more notice, and that I could walk them through the setup process if they wanted. He was quiet for a moment. Nadia, he said, we didn't know you were paying all of this. I know, I said. The electric followed on a Friday, 11 days after the Sunday dinner. By then, my mother had already been to the utility office with Colt's help and opened a new internet account in her name. But the electric cutoff still surprised her, because she'd assumed it would be simple to transfer and had not yet made the call. I was at work when Colt texted me at 2:17 p.m. The text said, Nadia, why is the electricity off at Mom and Dad's? I typed back. The account was in my name. I removed myself from it. They'll need to open a new one. 3 dots appeared and then stopped. Then, how long has it been in your name? About 2 years. And you just turned it off. I stopped the automatic payment. The account lapsed. I didn't turn anything off. The dots again. Then nothing. I set my phone face down and finished the report I was working on. My mother called me that Friday evening. This was not a quiet call. She said she couldn't believe it. She said she had never been so cold in her own house. She said the kids had been there that afternoon. B and May had come after school, and the lights hadn't worked, and they'd been frightened. I said I was sorry the girls had been there. I said I genuinely hadn't known their schedule. She said that wasn't the point. She said the point was that I had done this deliberately. She said she had been trying to have a conversation with me about the family, and instead of talking to her like an adult, I had done something spiteful and childish. I did not tell her about the spreadsheet. She knew about the spreadsheet. She had made the spreadsheet. I said, Mom, those accounts were in my name because I set them up and I was paying them. I've been paying them for 2 years. I wasn't consulted about what my salary was supposed to cover going forward. I said no at dinner. That was my answer. She said, You could have told us. You could have given us time. I said, You could have asked me before you made the spreadsheet. The line was quiet. She said, We are your family. I said, I know, and I would like to keep being part of this family, but I'm not a line item in a household budget. She hung up. I sat at my kitchen table with my hands flat on the surface. The apartment was very quiet. My downstairs neighbor had music going, something soft and far away. I thought about the spreadsheet. I thought about the $41,220. I thought about my father's voice on the phone. We didn't know you were paying all of this. The thing about being the capable one in a family is that your competence makes you invisible. Not invisible in the way of being ignored. They knew I was there. They called me. They relied on me. But invisible in the way that a wall is invisible. You stop seeing a wall when it's been there long enough. You just walk around it. You just lean against it. You never think about what the room would look like without it. I had spent a very long time being a wall. I sat at my kitchen table until the music downstairs stopped. The call I did not expect came on a Monday, 9 days after the electric went off. It was from a woman named Judith Calloway. She introduced herself as the property manager for the building at 4418 West Glen Drive, which was not my parents' address. It was an address I recognized after a moment as the building where Colt and Priya had moved in the spring, the one after their landlord sold. She said she was calling about the lease on Unit 4C. She said she was looking at the lease, and the guarantor on file was a Nadia Voss, and there was a cosigner clause that required notification in the event of a significant change in cosigner financial status or intent to withdraw. I sat down. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you say that again?" She said my name was listed as lease guarantor on the unit. She said the current tenants, a Mr. and Mrs. Coltboss, had provided my information when they applied in March. She had a signed guarantor agreement with my signature on it, along with a copy of my most recent pay stub and a copy of my driver's license. I said I had not signed a guarantor agreement for that lease. A pause. She said she had a document with my signature. I said I would like to see it. She emailed it to me within the hour. I opened the PDF on my laptop and looked at the signature line. It was my signature, or close enough to it that it had passed a property manager's review. My name, my license number, my employer, my income. All accurate. I called my office's general counsel, a patient man named Eric Wolf, and described the situation. He said the word forgery and the phrase civil fraud within the first 4 minutes of the call. He said I should not call Colt. He said I should call an attorney. I called an attorney. Her name was Rebecca Staines, a real estate and civil litigation attorney at a firm in Columbus. I reached her that same afternoon. She asked me to send the PDF. She called me back in 90 minutes. She said the document was clearly intended to bind me to a lease guarantee without my knowledge or consent. She said I had grounds for a civil claim. She said the more immediate concern was that I needed to notify the property management company in writing that the guarantor's signature had been forged and that I was not bound by the agreement before any lease default event occurred that someone might try to hold me liable for. She sent the letter to Judith Calloway the following morning on my behalf. I did not call Colt. I called my father. My father answered on the second ring. He sounded like he'd been sitting in a quiet room. I told him what I had found. I told him about the lease guarantee, the forged signature, the attorney. I did not raise my voice. I kept my sentences short. I told him the facts.
He was quiet for a long time.
Then he said, "Nadia."
I didn't know about that.
I said, "I believe you." He said, "Your mother didn't either." I said, "I don't know that yet." Another silence. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said I wasn't going to pursue a criminal filing. I said Rebecca Staines had made the notification to the property manager, and I was no longer bound by the agreement. I said Colt and Priya would need to find a legitimate guarantor or qualify on their own, and that was their problem to solve. I said I was not going to absorb that problem. My father said, "He's your brother." I said, "I know who he is." I said it quietly. I heard him breathe. I said, "Dad, I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about the spreadsheet and about the last several years, because I think we've all been operating under assumptions that haven't been stated clearly, and I would like to state them clearly now." He said, "Okay." I said, "I've been paying your electricity, your gas, and your internet for 2 years. I've been paying your medication Kogap since the diagnosis. I have transferred money to Colt at least 7 times in 4 years, totaling more than $14,000. I have not kept a formal ledger for most of it because I didn't think I needed to, and that was my mistake. But I want you to hear the number." He didn't say anything. I said, "I don't want repayment. I'm not presenting a bill. I'm telling you because I think you didn't know the full picture, and I think that matters for what happened at that dinner." He said, "It does." I said, "I'm not going to sign the spreadsheet. I'm not going to fund a household budget that I had no part in drafting. If there are specific things, the medication, a specific repair, something genuine, I'm willing to help the way I always have. But I'm not a revenue source. And I need that to be understood." He said, "I hear you." I said, "I need you to say it back to me." A pause. "You're not a revenue source. And what Colt did was wrong." I said, "Thank you." We stayed on the phone for another few minutes, talking about nothing in particular, the weather, his next cardiology appointment, a road repair on his street that had been going on since spring. It was a quiet conversation. Before I hung up, he said my name once, in a tone I hadn't heard from him in a long time. I drove to the pharmacy after work and paid the medication transfer manually, the way I'd been doing it since the week after the dinner. My father's prescription was ready. I left it for him to pick up. I did not hear from Colt for 11 days. When he called, it was a Sunday morning, earlier than he'd normally call. His voice had the particular flatness of someone who has been up for hours before making a call they didn't want to make. He said the property manager had sent him a formal notice. The guarantor agreement had been invalidated. He and Priya had 30 days to either provide a new qualified guarantor or demonstrate independent qualification, which meant, at their current income and credit profile, they didn't qualify for the unit on their own.
He said he needed my help.
I said no. He said he had 2 daughters and a baby coming and he was asking me as his sister. I said, Colt, you used my name on a legal document without my consent. You listed my license number and my income and put my signature on a guarantor agreement that I never agreed to. I'm not going to respond to that by helping you. I'm going to respond to it by not pursuing a civil claim, which is the help I'm giving you. He said, that was a mistake. I panicked. We needed the apartment. I said, I know. He said, Nadia, come on. I said, I hope you find a solution. I mean that. I hope Priya and the kids land somewhere good. But I'm not the solution. He didn't say anything. I said, I have to go. I ended the call. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment, and something in my chest settled, like a piece of furniture finally standing level after years of being shimmed up with folded paper. I did not gloat. There was nothing to gloat about. Colt's problem was a problem his own choices had built, and I had spent enough years inserting myself into the structural damage other people caused. I wasn't doing it anymore. Here is what happened in the following months. Colt and Priya applied for a smaller Unit 2 buildings over. Priya's parents co-signed. They moved in 6 weeks after the notice and it was, by all accounts, fine. The apartment was smaller. They managed. My mother called me 3 weeks after my conversation with my father. The call was brief. She said she'd been thinking. She said she hadn't known about the accounts, the full extent of what I'd been covering, and that the spreadsheet had been wrong. She didn't say the word sorry, but she said those 2 things, and I think that was what she had. I said I appreciated her saying it. She asked if I was coming to Colt's daughter's birthday in November. I said I'd check my schedule. I went. My father's cardiology follow-up in the fall came back with a stable reading. His cardiologist, Dr. Reyes, told him the medication was working and they could extend the monitoring window to 6 months. My father called to tell me. He sounded like himself. I made partner track analyst at Hartwell and Marsh in the spring, a promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years. My direct supervisor, a woman named Teresa Park, called me into her office to tell me in person. The title came with a $14,500 salary adjustment and a new client portfolio. I went home that evening and sat in my apartment with the windows open and ate leftover pasta and did not call anyone. I thought about what it had cost me to be reliable for so many years. Not the money. The money was a number, and numbers were manageable. I thought about the Sunday evenings I'd spent at my parents' house when I could have been anywhere else. I thought about the calls I'd answered and the estimates I'd read and the transfers I'd made, and I thought about how none of that had been wrong. Exactly. It had been chosen, which was different. The choosing was the part I'd lost track of. I keep the medication transfer going. Every month, automatic, to the pharmacy. My father takes his medication. His heart is stable. I go to Sunday dinners when I want to, which turns out to be most of them because I like sweet corn, and I like May falling asleep against my shoulder, and I like the particular smell of that backyard in late summer. I go because I want to, and that distinction, wanting to versus being expected to, is one I will not give up again. The utility accounts are in my parents' names now. They pay them. The amounts are unremarkable. They always were. The last time I saw Colt, he was helping me build something out of wooden blocks at the living room floor while Priya sat next to him with her feet up, her 3rd pregnancy heavy and obvious. He looked up when I came in. We didn't say much. He handed me a block that B immediately took back from me, which made us both smile. I don't know what he understands about what he did or what he's told himself about it. That's not mine to manage. What I know is this. I am not a wall. I am not a budget line. I am not a bridge loan or a backup plan or a safety net for people who haven't built their own. I am a person who is useful and generous and capable, and those things are gifts I give when I choose to give them. When someone tries to take a gift before it's offered, the answer is no. That's not hardness. That's the difference between a door and a hole in a wall. If you've ever been the one quietly holding a household together, the one whose name was on the accounts, whose number everyone had, whose absence no one considered until the lights went out, you know the specific silence of realizing that the reliability people counted on was never acknowledged as a choice. I hope you find your Sunday with the windows open. I hope you figure out which things you're doing because you want to and which ones you've just been doing so long they started to feel mandatory. And I hope, when someone slides a spreadsheet toward you and calls your salary family money, you remember that your answer is a complete sentence. Before you go, I want to ask you something. When the property manager called Nadia and told her that her signature was on that lease, she had a choice about how far to take it. She chose to stop at the civil notice and not pursue the claim further. Was that the right call? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, hit like and subscribe. There's a new story every week, and the bell keeps you from missing them. Thank you for listening.